Welcome back to another episode of TimeOut with the Sports Doctor podcast, where life, sports, and medicine intersects. We are glad that you are part of this growing community where we strive to help you strengthen your mindset, help you grow your assets, and help you achieve whatever level of success that you want for your life. Go to our website at Dr.Derrick, thesportsdoctor.com, where you can find all the latest content, and you can also follow us on our social media channels. Now, let's get into this episode. So welcome back to another episode of Time Out with the Sports Doctor podcast. We have another special guest for you today, Mr. Donald Kelley, who is a broker at Pearson Ravitz. Pearson Ravitz is a company that we've worked very closely with on this podcast. They sell disability and life insurance that is really specific for healthcare providers and doctors in specific. So very glad to have you on. I'm excited to bring this information to the audience. And just thank you for spending your time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. So let's start off with, I know right now you are a broker selling disability insurance, but tell us about your past career in medicine.
Yeah, for sure. I think my career path was kind of dictated by COVID. So I went to Penn State University, studied exercise physiology, and after that, I spent most of my time in the fitness industry. So I worked for a couple of large fitness clubs and focused primarily on, people that were post cardiac and orthopedic rehab. So I had a lot of older clients. I got to see a lot of people that had to work around a lot of different limitations that they had. And I really enjoyed what I did. And that's really how I became so familiar with the story of our Pearson Ravitz's founder, Dr. Stephanie Pearson. She was an OBGYN who was injured while delivering a baby. It really affected her career, and she was kind of forced to pivot, and that really led her to focus on just advocating for other physicians who maybe didn't understand the disability insurance marketplace very well. But I became really familiar with her story because she was one of the clients at the facility that I worked at. So then obviously in 2020, we know what happened, and any kind of one-on-one personal service like what I did was really hit hard by the pandemic. So I lost my job, at least, temporarily while the pandemic was kind of at its height. And during that time, I said, you know what? I'm going to have to make a career pivot here, and started reaching out to a lot of my clients that were decision makers at different companies and stuff like that. And obviously Stephanie was one that stuck out to me. And she told me, listen, your skill set fits with somebody that I would want to work with and bring onto my team. So, I had nothing else going on. So I got my broker's license, and the rest is history. So, the mission of the company that I work with now really aligns with what I enjoyed so much about my past life. And it was a pretty seamless pivot to where I'm at now.
Yeah, so it's a phenomenal story, both your story and Dr. Pearson's story. So if you haven't listened to that episode with Dr. Stephanie Pearson, go back to listen to it. And, she was really open about the struggles that she had going through the whole disability process, and going through being injured, and going through facing the fact that her career was coming to an end. And it's very interesting that someone who was on the other side helping her on that journey to recovery is somebody that's working in the business now. So you never know when you're going to meet a future boss. You never know when you're going to meet a future colleague. So you just have to really always treat people the best possible. That's my thought on things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worked out for both of us, and we're able to help a lot of people because of it.
Yeah. So with selling disability insurance, especially with Pearson Ravitz, you're focused on selling to professionals in the medical field, and almost more of a focus on doctors, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about why disability insurance is so important for doctors to have.
Yeah. So physicians find themselves in a very unique place in the workforce where they have a very high earning potential typically, but they also rely very heavily on their physical bodies and their ability to perform really, really specific tasks.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, they become very exposed. God forbid something happens to them that limits their ability to do those specific tasks, right? And it can be a really unforgiving position to be in if you've put all this time and money into your training and expertise, and suddenly you find that you're not able to do what you've been trained to do, right? And really, the specific disability insurance that we focus on protects those very, very specific job duties, right? There's a lot of different types of disability insurance out on the marketplace, but we only work with 5 specific disability insurance carriers that cover physicians and that have what we call a specialty specific own occupation definition of disability. So if you can't do what you've been trained to do and boarded to do, you're going to get a benefit payment that's going to be typically equal to 70 to 85% of your take home income, even if you can do a different job, right? So in Stephanie's example, she did not have the right type of disability insurance, unfortunately. But if she had, and her situation played out where she's not able to work in the OR anymore, but she started her own company, she would continue to get compensated by one of those disability insurance companies.
So you mentioned own occupation. So that's very important. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But most people are encouraged to get it during their residency, not when you need it, right? So having the right type of insurance coverage and having own occupation insurance. And you want to be well covered early in your career, specifically at the beginning of your career, because we'll talk about the factors that you look into as a broker when you're evaluating a client, and not necessarily even you, but the insurance companies. What factors do they look at when they're determining who gets coverage and the amount of coverage?
Sure. Yeah. So a couple of reasons why it's important to address this really early on in your career. And I know that thankfully there's a lot of education out there now for residents and fellows that tells them, you want to get this taken care of while you're in training. But there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, you get a policy, the better. First of all, if you're a physician and you're in residency or fellowship, pretty much every single one of these companies is going to heavily incentivize you to get a policy placed while you're still in training. And what I mean by that is you're going to see significant discounts that are available to you, anywhere from 10 to 20%, depending on the company, that live on the policy for the life of the policy. So as long as you have it in force, those discounts are applied to whatever you're paying, and you can only get them while you're in training. So that's the number one reason why it's marketed to residents and fellows. And if you are a resident or a fellow and you're listening right now, chances are your inbox is full of emails from different agencies, brokerages, trying to solicit your business for disability insurance while you're still in training. But there is really a good reason for that. Now, the insurance company, it makes sense for them because they want you on their books for as long as possible, right? So that you're paying them for as long as possible. But also they want to get you in the door when you're young and healthy and you don't pose a significant risk to them, right? Now, they're going to make it worth your while. And on the flip side, when you're young and healthy is really the most important time for you to get one of these policies placed. When you go to apply for a private disability insurance policy, it will be medically underwritten. So they're going to look back through your medical records. It's really a pretty invasive process where they can pull any medical history that you have. And if they find something living in your medical records that they consider a pre-existing condition, they'll exclude all claims related to that pre-existing condition. So the younger you are, the healthier you are, the more important it is to get a policy placed because you can get something with as few exclusions and limitations on it as possible. And then once it's in force, it's what we call non-cancelable. So the insurance company can never change the contract once it's in force all the way up to age 65. So anything that happens to you, God forbid, moving forward is covered under that policy language.
Yeah. So that's very important. And the discount that you get as a resident or fellow carries with the policy for the life of this policy, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Especially when I have a resident that's graduating, they say, okay, this is nice that I get this discount now, but I'm going to be an attending soon. Yeah, it lives on the policy forever and ever. That comes back to that non-cancelable language. And also when you need to increase the policy, once you are making a lot more money, hopefully as an attending, the discount is applied to the increase that you make to the benefit too. So it really does have the potential to go a long way.
Yeah. So when you're talking to residents, what are some of the main concerns that they'll ask you or questions that they ask you?
So why do I need this? I don't anticipate becoming disabled. That's my favorite. Right? Nobody does. That's how the insurance industry works. But no, most of the pushback that I get is just around, I'm very fit, I'm very healthy, I work out, I take care of myself, I eat right. I don't foresee a situation where this is going to be an issue for me, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, we have countless examples where people did not anticipate becoming disabled and then something happens to them and now they're leaning entirely on whatever their policy's benefit is, right? So I mean, that's the game of insurance, right? It's risk transfer. So the
Hmm.
insurance company will tell you, here's the defined number that you're going to have to pay to transfer all this risk over to us. It's a matter of whether or not you're willing to pay it, right? And if you're willing to take the risk, then certainly you can save some money, but especially when the stakes are very, very high for physicians, that's why it's such an important product to have.
Sure. And then when residents call or they want to get it started early in their residency program, is it often that you have residents making claims, or is it usually later in their career when the claims come in?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, people will always have questions around claims history. We can really only speak anecdotally because, as you can imagine, insurance companies hold their claims data pretty close to the vest. They don't really want you to
Right.
know a whole lot about it. I will tell you, our company's been around 7 years, and we have 30 people that have gone out on a claim roughly with us, and most of them got their policies when they were in residency and fellowship, right? So the short answer to your question is no, we don't have a ton of residents and fellows that go out on claim, right? And that's why the insurance company is going to make it cheap for them to get
Hmm.
it. But certainly, pretty soon after, we've seen a lot of claims, right? And a lot of these people are in their 30s and 40s. So as you get older, you pose a greater risk, obviously. But certainly, there are plenty of examples of people that are considered young and healthy, so to speak, that something unexpected happens.
As healthcare providers, we spend a large portion of our lives focused on our training as well as taking care of other individuals. But I'm calling a timeout because life can change in an instant. We know it's difficult to fathom that a sudden illness, injury, or death could put you and your family in a devastating financial situation. But that's where Dr. Stephanie Pearson and her unique team of advisors at Pearson Ravitz come into play. They focus on empowering physicians like yourself to protect your most valuable asset, your income, and life's most important people, your family. So go to pearsonravitz.com to make sure that you are protected today. And what are some of the common claims that you see for physicians going out?
Yeah, I think it depends on the specialty, but certainly orthopedic stuff is the number one cause. We see a lot of repetitive motion injury, right? Like shoulders, wrists, carpal tunnel, stuff like that, back issues. Man, back and neck issues are really, really big reasons for people to go out on claim. Any kind of nagging injury, most people, when they think of a disability, what comes to mind is like a traumatic situation, right? But a lot of these orthopedic issues that people run into are just related to doing the same types of motions every single day and the wear and tear that it takes on your body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is important to know because, especially as a surgeon or especially as a person who is doing a lot of that hands on activities are a part or procedures are a part of your specialty, even more important to have coverage because you, especially on occupation coverage, because if you can't operate as a surgeon, you want to still be able to possibly be another type of physician or still be able to work while you're claiming your disability for that surgical part that you cannot complete.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously for proceduralists, it's even more important. The catch there is that for proceduralists, it's also more expensive, obviously.
Right.
The insurance company knows that the risks and the stakes are a little bit higher. But yeah, orthopedic limitations are number one. But also the other thing that most people don't think about is this also covers illness, right? So chronic and progressive illness is another big reason why we see people go out on claim. And that's the number one reason we see maybe, some of your specialties that aren't as procedure dominant. That's why they'll go out on claim, right? The C word is the big one. So certainly we have a few breast cancer claims that we've seen. That's a big one. But, any kind of chronic and progressive illness is very, very difficult to predict.
Right.
But it's a big reason.
Yeah. So Pearson Ravitz is a little different from a lot of companies. So talk about the difference of being a broker versus being an agent.
Yeah. So in the insurance space, it works one of two ways, right? A company will either have what they call a captive agent, who works directly for the insurance company and can only sell their stuff. Right. So there are a ton of different examples of this where, if you hear go talk to your so-and-so insurance agent, chances are that guy works for the insurance company. The other way it works is insurance companies will license their business out to independent brokers like us to sell their business for them, which creates a more competitive marketplace. It means that we can work with a lot of different companies. We can kind of look for the best deal out there within the confines of the contract language that we're looking for, but then, make a recommendation based on what is being offered to you from a bunch of different companies. Now, what makes our company a little bit different, there are tons of different brokerages out there that can execute these contracts for you. The difference with our company is that all of our brokers, if you set up a phone call with us and you have an initial consultation, that's with somebody who is a salaried employee. So they don't stand to make a commission based on whether or not you execute a contract. And that's really at the heart of what we do, because we really believe in leading with education. One of the most impactful things about Stephanie's story is that she really didn't know anything about what she had. She didn't really know where to turn once she was unable to work. And we want to make sure that everybody knows exactly what to expect, right? And we focus on education. We want to make sure you understand what you're buying, all the contract language that goes into a strong policy, and then we leave it up to you to make the decision. Now, typically, we're going to recommend that you go with the company that's pricing best for you, but there's a lot that goes into it, and we just want to make sure that you're making an informed decision.
Absolutely. So just on a more personal note, I understand that you're a new father now, right?
Yeah, I have a 10-month-old. You turned 10 months yesterday, actually. And then I have another one on the way. So he's due in
Wow.
October. Yeah. So it's going to be two
Yeah.
boys, 14 months apart.
Okay.
I'm really
Yeah.
excited. I am, I'm just loving it. It's the greatest thing ever. I have a very happy baby. I'm really lucky. But yeah, I'm just soaking it up.
Yeah. So that's how they bait you in. The first baby is the happy, quiet one, and then the second one comes along. Yeah. So
Let's
my
hope
kids,
that's not the case, but
yeah. Yeah.
you
So
might
I
be
have
right.
three. The first two are 2.5 years apart. Then the second two are 18 months apart. And the
Wow.
18 months apart are almost like twins. So 14 months, yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty much pure chaos around here for a little while, but in the long run, they'll be buddies. So
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
excited.
Absolutely. So just becoming a father, kind of how does that change your perspective of life and dealing with things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot more important, right? And you're no longer just working for yourself, you're working for somebody else. And it was what initiated my wife and I both getting life insurance. You start to think about, wow, these people are really going to be in a hole if I'm not here, which is nice. It's nice to be relied on, but it's a lot of pressure. So you want to just make sure that all your T's are crossed, I's are dotted. And so, it's something we obviously talk to people, usually graduating residents and fellows. They're kind of around the same age as my wife and I, right? We're kind of in our early 30s.
Right.
So it's people that are in a lot of the time in the same stage of life.
Sure. Sure. Well, you're healthy enough that you can sometimes even feel invincible. However, this is very important to keep yourself to cover your ability to make money, which is one of your biggest assets, especially as a physician.
Yeah, it really is your biggest asset. And I think people don't think about it that way. They kind of take it for granted, especially if you've been doing the same thing for a while and been working hard for years and years. You take for granted your ability to do that. So,
Yeah. So talk to a resident now. We're coming towards the end of residency. and they're like, oh my goodness, I've gone through residency. Nobody told me about disability insurance. I don't want to lose this discount. So talk to us about that.
Well, that's probably the most common conversation that I have, especially this time of year. So I'm pretty familiar. Yeah. So a couple of things, first of all, we want to make sure that we're making an informed decision. It's not easy. Residents, especially graduating residents and fellows, they're pretty strapped for time. They've got a lot going on, very busy. And the products that we're talking about here on the disability side are not simple. So we want to make best use of your time. But also, the good news here is that most of these companies will give you up to 90 days after you graduate to still secure their resident or fellowship discount, right? So it is a sales tactic that you'll see out there a lot from other agents and brokers where they'll tell you, you need to get this policy before you graduate or you're screwed, right? And, this time of year, especially a lot of people are graduating end of June. This week, especially, I've had multiple phone calls already with people that say, I got to get this done this week. No, you don't. It's okay. Now, it is time sensitive, right? You don't want to put it on the back burner and forget about it, but you don't have to execute this week. So make sure that you're taking your time, you're doing your research, you understand what you're purchasing. But, now is the time, especially if you're graduating.
Sure. So on TimeOut with the Sports Doctor, this is your final timeout. So we've discussed a lot of different kind of the entities and details around disability insurance, but just talk to the physician or the resident fellow, whoever who is still on the fence about, is this the right time? Should I wait? I'm healthy right now. I probably can wait longer. Let's talk about why you really say now is the time.
So the goal here and the biggest concern that we have is making sure that you secure your good health now while you're young and healthy. If you're young and healthy, now is when you want to get something in place. And we can work with you. There are ways that we can work we can kind of get the lowest barrier to entry from a price perspective and make sure that the policy's placed, it's non-cancelable. They can never medically underwrite you again. Anything and everything that could potentially happen to you in the future is covered, and you have the ability to increase the benefit when you need to, when you're really attending money, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're most concerned with. We're not as concerned with protecting your resident or fellow salary, right? That's not why we're doing this. We're doing this so that in the future, when you really do have that earning potential and you really do start to make a significant living, that we can protect that. So if we get the policy placed now, it guarantees you that any and everything is covered, even when you're making more money in the future.
Yeah, and you'll never be younger than you are today. And for most people, you won't be healthier than you are today. So I think that's kind of the take home point.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So thank you for, providing this information. We've had technical difficulties, but we battled through it. And, I really appreciate you bringing this. And I really appreciate Pearson Ravitz and all the things that they've done for this podcast over the last few years.
All right, Dr. Burgess, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you working through some technical stuff with me, but hopefully we got a lot of good information, and, it was my pleasure.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for continuing to support this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, then please leave a 5-star review. And if you haven't done so, subscribe so you continue to get the updated episodes. Until later, peace. Time out with the sports doctor. Keep our head right in the game. We ain't never stopping. You are now tuned in. Trust you don't want to miss. This is where life, sports, and medicine